Hello and welcome to Franklin Event Center and a program by Beaverdale Books. Before we begin, I want to mention a couple of our other upcoming events. This Friday at 6:30, we have Jenna Plum, and she will share her novel, Murder Your Darlings. Then next week, February 17th at 6:30 p.m., Dan Henderson will be here at the store sharing his book, Rhythm and Pep, The Vaudeville Career of the Pearson Brothers. And you can find all the details on our website or via our newsletter. I have the pleasure of introducing Heather Gudenkopf, who is going to be the moderator tonight. And Heather is the Edgar Award nominated New York Times and USA Today best-selling author of so many great novels, including The Overnight Guest, Everyone is Watching, her newest one, Perfect House. And with that, I'll hand it over to Heather.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, well, just you wait, because I get to read yours. So yeah, I'm so thrilled to be here tonight with Adele Parks, and so excited. So we've connected over social media, and I've been a fan for a long time. And so it's such a treat to be able to be here together in person. So Adele Parks is the author of 25, that is right, 25 best-selling novels, including the recent Sunday Times hit Just Between Us, and the Audible #1 sensation, One Last Secret. And the novel we are here to discuss, Our Beautiful Mess, and it is a beautiful, beautiful mess of a book in all the best ways. All the best ways. I can't wait to get into it. And Adele has published, as I mentioned, 25 books in 25 years, which we have to talk about because that is prolific. And over 6 million English editions of her work have been sold. And she's been translated into 31 languages. Her #1 bestsellers, Lies, 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 and Just My Luck were both shortlisted for the British Book Awards and have been optioned for development for TV and film. She is an ambassador of the National Library Trust, Literacy Trust, and the Reading Agency, two charities that promote literacy in the UK. Adele was born in North Yorkshire and has lived in Botswana, Italy, and London, and is now settled in Guildford, Surrey. And in 2022, she was awarded an MBE by King Charles III for services to literature. So everyone, please welcome Adele.
Just pull.
I did tell you I wasn't good on tech. There we are. That feels a little bit more comfortable. Relax.
Right, good. Well, it's such a pleasure. Pleasure to have you here. So thank you for making the trip.
Thank you
And
for
to talk
having me.
about this wonderful book. And when I tell you this book had me in its death grip, it really did. So can you start off by just telling everyone a little bit about what the book is about?
I can indeed. So on the first page, it says, the end. Now, before you rush back to the bookshop and say, look, this is clearly damaged and something's gone wrong, no, it's deliberately the end. I want to play with you. So we open the book and Connie, and at this point, obviously you know nothing about her, but there's a woman called Connie, who's a midlife woman, and somebody is threatening to shoot somebody, and then they do. And Connie has to tend to the wound. We don't know if it's her own wound or somebody she loves, but it's definitely, you know, she's upset and it's a problem. I mean, you don't normally see a shooting and think it's fine. So, you know, it's a dreadful situation. And then you turn the page and it says 11 days earlier, and we find the same Connie up a ladder decorating her Christmas tree. And at that point in her life, the only thing she's really concerned about is the fact that she's thrilled because the kids are coming home from university for the holidays, and she's a little bit frantic about whether her charcuterie board will look good enough for Instagram. So, you know, we understand that at this point, Connie has really nothing to worry about. But as a reader, we've all been let in on this clue that she is heading in 11 days' time for some real trouble. She's excited that her daughters she's got 3, one's at home anyhow, but 2 are at university. She's super excited the eldest 2 are going to be home and the house is going to be full of love and laughter and noise. All the other relatives are coming too. I'm particularly excited because the eldest daughter is for the first time bringing her boyfriend back. And Connie's a bit of a romantic and she's excited about the idea of young love being back in our house. My husband's in the audience, so I need to say there's nothing wrong with old love either. Very much a fan.
Thank you.
But she is excited about the young love. However, and although I'm talking for a long time, this really is only chapter 1. The moment she opens the door to her eldest daughter Fran and the boyfriend Zach, she knows without a shadow of a doubt that Zach is connected to the one mistake she has made in her past. And if that mistake is revealed, everything she's done to build her family and this level of joy and perfection will be undone. So Connie is stressed. She has a secret from her family, never a great place to be. However, as the reader moves on and reads from many different viewpoints, including Fran, including Zach, including other characters, we'll quickly discover that Connie is only one of a number of people with secrets, and we already know that one of them will lead to this deathly situation.
So good. And the
I'm
fact
so careful, because you know I can't really say anything about this.
we have to be very careful because all these twists and turns that come along are so much fun and so well done. But let's talk about where you got the idea for this, because it's this perfect family. And, you know, it's probably all of our biggest fears of opening the door and seeing our one mistake show up in front of us. Where did the idea come from?
Yeah, I think it's never, for me, it's rarely one single idea. There's usually a number of themes that are sort of pootling around. And some of the themes that were going around in my head one of them was about generational divide. I think we talk so much about why we're separate from boomers, are separate from Gen Xers, that are separate from millennials, that are separate from Gen Z, and we're always talking about that. And actually, I'm a big believer in what we have in common. And whilst young people now, Gen Zs, might say, you know, I'm concerned about how I present myself, I'm concerned about my identity or my sexual health or that sort of thing. And when Gen Xers were talking, they'd have said, oh, I think I look awful and I haven't got a boyfriend. It actually was the same concern. It was just a different vocabulary. So that was one of the themes I was looking at, that sort of intergenerational distrust, which is such a shame because we ought to be supportive and trusting and learning from one another. Each generation, I believe, ought to be doing that. So I had that going around in my head. But I also had a thought about how we look at our parents. And we think our parents, for quite a long time in our lives, we think our parents are perfect. I have a 25-year-old son, as well as the 25-year-old novels. And I spent a long time from the get-go telling him how many mistakes I make, because I wanted him to know that genuinely, none of us are perfect. And I didn't want it to be a huge shock to him when he was, say, 16, 17, 18 and expecting a lot from me. I try my hardest for him all the time. And I could tell him I would always do that, but sometimes I would say, well, I don't really know the right way to go here because I've never come across this situation before, but we can figure it out together. So I think that was in my mind. But the particular reason I wanted it to be Connie and this family is actually all down to a similar sort of situation to this. When I wrote my very first novel, which was a novel called Playing Away, and in a totally different genre, not really a family drama, much more of a romance. I was at an event, and in those days all my events used to be sort of full of people in their 20s, because I was in my late 20s and as I moved into my early 30s. But I remember a mother and daughter were there, and the mother was the age I am now. And she came up to me and she said, oh, I've read Playing Away, Adele, and it's brilliant. I was so pleased because she was a little bit older. I hadn't been seeing her as my target audience. And she said, I just can't wait till Connie goes through the menopause. I was a little bit taken aback because it was 25 years ago and nobody said menopause. And so there was that. But secondly, it was the first time I'd encountered somebody. Oh, how lovely. Coming in. Hello, hello. Coming in.
Sorry, we couldn't find you.
Ah, bless the way here. And you haven't missed too much. Come in and make yourself comfortable. We're just talking about where did the idea come from, the book. Your mid-story. So I made a promise to myself, because this lady had believed in the character so much, she thought she would age. And I thought, oh my gosh, I think it was the first time somebody really believed in what I'd written. And I did make a promise to myself that if I was still writing in 25 years, I may not write a book about Connie's menopause, and I have not written about Connie's menopause, but I did think I would write about Connie's midlife.
Right. So was her daughter's name really Connie?
No, it was
just okay.
yes.
Yeah. So amazing that you kept that in your pocket for all these years.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, I think the main reason I write, I mean, I've touched on it. I've touched on the fact that I think finding what we have in common is significantly more important than finding what we have that divides us. And I think readers, and therefore writers, obviously, are very empathetic people because they walk in the shoes of other people. So that's all, that's terrific. And because of that, and the connections I make with my readers, that is the most important part of it for me, actually. So yes, I quite often have little promises that I make readers, and it'll be, can you name a character? I'm like, yep, clock it, or can you set it here? I'm like, yep, good. In fact, America is responsible for me writing an entire novel that I wasn't expecting to write. So I wrote a book that in the UK was called Just Between Us, but it got a different name here. Here it was called Woman Last Seen. I'm going to keep my husband for...
Woman Last Seen was both of you.
Okay, so both of you was the first book, and here it's called Woman Last Seen. And I wrote that book during COVID. Now you all know, we don't want to even think about it or talk about it, but you know how literally locked down it was and claustrophobic it was. So I left an ambiguous ending. I told you guys, my readers, who'd done it, but I kind of let it, she got away with it, it was like that was going to happen. So my sister was furious. She didn't like that. She said, I had one job. She's a teacher. She said, you have one job and you haven't done it. You meant to finish your book and tell me what happened. So I went, oh, okay. But I sold 250,000 copies in the UK and didn't get a single complaint. So I thought, it's just my sister, how it is. So I chose to ignore that. Then I launched in America, because America's launch is often a few months behind. And I think pretty much anyone who wrote that book got in touch and said, can't wait for the sequel.
Oh, wow.
And I was like, oh, okay, well, in that case, I better write a sequel. So I then did write a sequel. So yes, I do listen to my readers.
Yeah. I know, are all your books set in the UK?
Most. I think one's set in Italy, which, as you mentioned in the intro, I've lived in Italy for a year. It took me about 17 years after I had lived there to write a book. A couple, there are American parts of it. There's one that there's parts, it is in France, but the characters are all British. There might be the odd relative who isn't, or that sort of thing, but on the whole, I write what I know.
Right.
I think it's tricky, isn't it, if you try and write a novel set in America, unless you've lived there and you know the accents, you know the reactions, because then, especially if I was trying to sell it here, you'd really see the gap of authenticity there, and I think that would be a problem.
Yeah, I write about where I live too.
Yes.
I just think it's my comfort spot,
Absolutely.
and I love writing about it.
Although, can I say, I haven't murdered anybody, so when I say I write about what I know, not that.
That's good to know.
Yeah, good.
So this is a family drama and a murder mystery, but it's got this condensed timeline that really ramps up the tension. Tell us a little bit about how you, are you a plotter? Are you a pantser? Did Did you know you wanted to have this all take place in this very short amount of time?
Well, the strange thing about my career, I think, is when I started writing, I'd never met a single author. I'd never even been to an event like this. I lived somewhere, North Yorkshire in Britain is quite remote, and certainly back in the sort of 80s, there were, nobody came. So I hadn't been on a creative writing course, and so everything I did was just sort of gut. And as I mentioned, I started in romances, and then as a few years went by, I wrote historical novels simply because I was incredibly interested in the First World War, and I wrote a couple of novels about World War One. And then after World War One, and I say, after you killed 75,000 men before breakfast, which actually, strictly speaking, wasn't me, that was history. But after you've written that sort of thing, it's quite hard to go back to thinking about romances. So then I started writing psychological thrillers, but I hadn't read any. So I genuinely, I hadn't read any. So I genuinely, I just wrote a book that was a romance but dark, and somebody did something dreadful and the consequences were huge and that sort of thing. But I just sort of thought, oh, this is a romance that's gone really badly wrong. I gave it to my, really badly wrong. And I gave it to my publisher, and she said, oh, so we're moving into psychological thrillers now, are we? And I sort of went, yes, as though it was a plan, I always meant to do that, it's a great market. And then rushed off to read as many as I possibly could to gen up on what my market was. But one of the things I sort of realised that I enjoyed is a ticking clock. I think it's a good structure anyway as a writer because it stops you rambling, and as you've already gathered, I can ramble with the best of them. So a ticking clock was a good idea for me, but I think it's just a really clever device for heightening tension, because I'm just guessing, but I bet you guys have all just felt really stressed because you wanted to be somewhere for a certain time. And so that's stressful, where if you knew it was kind of, you had an hour to get there, exactly the same thing, just walking in, but not stressful. And that basically is writing a novel. There we are, you can all go home, it's done. It sort of is part of the device. So I do plan, in so much as I always know my endings. You've mentioned that my books have lots of twists, and I love the twists. I love them for the fun we're going to have with the twists, because I know you will guess some of them and I want you to, and others you won't, I hope. And you'll then, once you read them, you'll think, well, of course, couldn't have been anything else, or I really hope that's what you think. So I know some of my big beats and I know my end, but I don't plan word by word. I might have a sort of line and I think, Connie realises secret's going to come out, and that's the line, and I'll get up in the morning and I think, where's she going to find that out then? Is she going to be at a yoga class? Is she going to be in a drug den? Is she, I'm being extreme, but I can wake up in the morning and then plan if I've got a little bit of a plot.
Yeah, so there's a line in the book that really stuck with me. So I want to talk to you about it. So in addition, you write these heart-pounding thrillers, page turners, but you really get into the minds of the characters. So Connie says, she was a moth, he was a flame. She could already smell her wings burning. And that line, just so those lines really, it gave me, I still get goosebumps. It's I wish I would have thought of something like that. It's so how do you do that? How do you slip into the characters' minds every day? And you write in this book,
I do have a little technique on that one. I interview my characters, which causes much hilarity in our family. So I have a range of about 200 questions. I won't ask them all the questions. I start it as a conversation, and I literally do speak back to myself in their voice. And it starts off with some simple things, like name and age, and are you married, and will you have children, and do you already have children, and are your parents still with us? And then I might just ask them something a little bit tricky, because that's not character, that's just, biographical detail. I might ask, And did you have a favourite parent? Were you the favourite child, or were you the one they didn't really want? because that's the kind of thing we'd never really ask at a dinner party without, you know, being clocked, I think. But I think it's the kind of thing I can ask the people I'm creating. And I can and do dig very deeply. And some of the questions are really frivolous. You know, what birth sign are you? And all the Aries say, there's no such thing, and they scoff, and all the Aquarians desperate to tell me they're an Aquarian. You know, so there's that. So that sort of thing happens for me too. But one time, and there's a book called One Last Secret, you mentioned it there, is got a #1. The main character was a high-end escort. Lady of negotiable affection, shall we say. It's about 9 o'clock, so, you know, we're still under the watershed, so I'll put it at that. Well, first of all, I quite often shadow my characters' careers. So if my character's going to be a teacher, I'll find a teacher and I'll shadow them, or you know, police, it's really important to really understand them. So when I told Jim, my husband, the plot, and I said, oh, and, you know, the lead's an escort, he was like, you cannot shadow that. Just as like, no. And I was like, I don't know, there might be a market. And he's like, no. Anyway, I actually then reached out. We live in Guildford in Surrey in the south of England, and it's quite posh. I can say that because I'm going to follow up and take the mick out of them because they think they're quite posh, and I've lived there thinking I'm quite posh. But I did Google escorts near me, and I found out we weren't that posh after all, because they were very near me. So I then got in touch with these escorts, a few of them, and I reached out to 3 of them and said, you know, this is who I am, this is my website, I'm very legit. I wonder if we can have a conversation, because I would like to understand your role, and I would like to understand what keeps you safe, what keeps you sanity, and what keeps your sense of humour, because I thought that would be really important, and those are the questions I normally ask my characters. So I did indeed pay women. The women here are going to be so surprised. I offered, would you like to take money to talk about sex rather than have sex? And every one of them agreed with me. So you know, I paid the going rate, apparently, to have these conversations. So I developed this character. But I was struggling with plot, and I came down for lunch one day with Jim, and he knows that when my eyes are up there, I'm thinking. So he's sort of trying, and I thought, oh, come on, we're at lunch, you've got to zone into Jim. So I said, I'm sorry, I was thinking about Dora. And he said, oh yes. I said, I asked her today, what's the one secret, does she have a secret that nobody knows? And that's one of my questions. And he said, and does she? I said, she does. She has a secret that nobody knows. And the relief in his face, he said, oh great, so plot point now, you threw that plot point. I went, no, she wouldn't tell me what it was. And there was just this moment where the house went quiet, and then he said, you do still know you're making her up, don't you? Just checking I hadn't gone completely wrong.
Yeah.
But yes, I interviewed them.
That's great. I love that. And how long do you do the entire interview ahead of time, or does...
Before I start writing. And so I spend about 3 to 4 months plotting and chatting to the characters during usually the UK launch, because when clearly when you're launching you do a lot of travel, so you're in your head a lot of the time, or you can be if you choose to be. And when I'm sort of promoting, I might be thinking about the next book. Well, it'll actually be the next book, one book ahead, because the next book will have already been written. So when I'm promoting, like now, I've already got the next book written, but I'm thinking about the one after that. So I'll start chatting to them and chatting to the characters, working out the plot, working out the problems with the plot. And then on January, the first Monday in January, I'm desperate to get working. I'm desperate to crack on. And that's sort of a technique of mine, that I wait and wait and wait, so that I'm super excited to get on with the writing, and then it happens quite quickly.
And in general, how long does it take you once you have...
6 or 7 months. Yes, 6 or 7 months. Although this time I've got this tour, and then I got the UK paperback tour. So I'm going to start saying 7 to 8 months to build in a little extra
Need a little
time.
time because traveling, it does take a lot out of you. It is it's
Some
so
of
much
it's-
fun, but
I mean, I love it. It genuinely is the most fun. I was going to say the funnest, because that's a silly thing my niece and I say to one another, the funnest, but of course it's not a word. It is genuinely so much fun meeting readers. That is what it's all about. But I find I'm not very good at writing when I'm on tour, which I think is why I'm good at thinking. That's fine, because this is thinking.
Right.
But I'm not good at writing. But I do know, we once went on a very fabulous festival in Dubai, and I remember looking around because there was so many authors and seeing the different techniques, and the one that stands out for me and always stuck with me was Sophie Hannah. She wrote 1,000 words a day, no matter what. So she'd be in the green room writing, or she'd be by the pool writing. She just would do it. I didn't care where she was, and I remember certain places and thinking it was so admirable, and I've never been able to do it.
just have to be in that frame of mind and you have to have your things around you. Do you?
I haven't really got any rituals or anything like that, but I like to know that I'm on my own.
Right.
I don't think I'm very good at. I'm all right if I'm say somewhere like a cafe where nobody knows me,
Right.
but I couldn't do it in a room where even Jim was.
Right.
And that would seem funny because I think I don't know. I just feel I would go into wife mode, or
Right.
rather than writer mode. And if I was there with my friends, like Sophie was, I would be going into, I've got to be chatting to my friends. Yeah.
When my kids were little, I would go from room to room wherever they were not. I had the laptop, and then I'd go like somewhere, and then they'd follow me in, and then I'd have to go somewhere else. And it's like I felt like such a neglectful mom, but you just need that time to be able
You do
to
need space. Yeah.
to do it. So you talked about interviewing your characters, but in the book, I really like this. Two of the characters, Zach and Fran, they play a game where they ask each other sticky questions, and I thought that was so interesting. So they really open up to each other. So like one of the questions was, what would you do if your friend's fiance was having an affair? And they talk it through. So it was a really, really open, caring relationship. But I got to thinking, that's a lot of what we do as writers. What would you do if? So do you do that with as you're brainstorming? And
Yes, I definitely think that is that's plotting. What's the most extreme situation you can put them in? What if this happened? What if that happened? And sometimes you say, what if this happened? And I think, well, it wouldn't, would it? So that's silly. Throw that one out. But that's how it works. I think with, I really enjoyed doing that with Zach and Fran, because that goes back to my generational thing, that it's very easy to dismiss young people and think, well, they know nothing, they're really young, they haven't lived. But actually, I think there is something going on with young people at the moment, this generation, that's really sincere, and maybe it's a flip away from all the social media that's completely lacking in sincerity in the vast majority of cases. And I know that, I discussed it with my son, and I know that's a thing they do. Like when they're dating, they go heavy quite quickly. Where I think I asked Jim that on our third year anniversary. I mean, I'm not sure, but I'm saying that it took us longer to start having those conversations. So I think I wanted us to very much believe in Zach and Fran, despite the fact they're very young.
yes, they're very young, but they're very soulful, and they have this connection. And of course, we can't give anything away, but they have some barriers that are trying to keep them apart. And one thing I noticed too is with Connie, as we get to know her, because when we first meet her, she is this very upstanding, motherly, but that she does have a past that really comes back.
Yes,
to
she does.
touch her, and how she navigates that. But she's a fierce mama bear, which is
She's
really
an
fun to see.
absolute mama bear. Yeah, she has definitely. She has a mistake, and that's in the earlier book and playing away. And it doesn't matter at all that you haven't read it. In fact, Genuinely, if you had read it 25 years ago, I'd be surprised if you could still remember it. I barely could. I had to go back and reread it. But it is there if you want to go back. I always think it's quite interesting. If you meet somebody from the get-go, you don't say, hi, guess what I did the day I was born? Let me take you right back there and build it all the way through. We sort of say, this is what I've done today, and then as you get to know them, you might peel back and go further back. So it doesn't matter if you go back to Connie when she was younger. And in fact, it's quite a fun way to do it. But this, I wanted her to have these flaws. How many books do you pick up? And at the back it says, perfect life, perfect mother, perfect... And I think, gosh, there's loads of them in books, because I've never met one in real life. I genuinely don't know a perfect person. Sorry, love, except for you, clearly. But, who does? We're all flawed. That's why we're marvellous. That's why we're exciting. That's why we're trying. If we were all perfect, none of us would have to try and be better or do anything with ourselves. But I think most of us are maybe not, haven't made a mistake quite like Connie's, but most of us have put a foot wrong somewhere. I don't think there's a person in the world that hasn't got a regret or a moment of shame, or and I thought that was worth investigating, and how amplified that would be if your children became aware of it. Because I think presenting, this thing about presenting and how we present, I think it was important to Gen Zs to present well to their children.
Right. So you've written women's fiction, you've written psychological thrillers. Is there a genre that, in historical, is there a genre that you haven't tackled yet, that you want to really want to do?
Oh, I thought you could say it is the one you haven't tackled yet that you'll never touch.
Oh, I want the answer to both of those.
Okay. So, when I met Jim, I was already writing, and he said he knew I was a writer, and he said, "Oh, what do you read?" And I said, "I read anything. I'm literally, my tastes are so wide, and I read memoirs, I read fiction, non-fiction, any genre in fiction. What about you?" And he said, "Oh, I read sci-fi." And I went, "No, not that." When I say I read anything, I mean anything but sci-fi, obviously. Which was quite funny. And he tried to persuade me to read sci-fi, and it didn't work. He tried so hard. So I've always said I'll never write in sci-fi. But interestingly, I have a sci-fi idea.
Oh, you have to do it.
Isn't that extraordinary? But then I'd have to read some sci-fi, wouldn't I, to see how it works. But maybe I'll just do what I did with my psychological thrillers. Maybe I'll write it first and then leave it to the publishers to worry about how they will market it. So I haven't done sci-fi, I haven't done romantasy, and I haven't yet read any romantasy. But I feel I should, because I think it's such a huge market. But I think, I don't know, I think it was a little bit like the sci-fi. Jim tried to persuade me with sci-fi, and at one point, it was Ian M. Banks he was trying to get me to read, and I said, "Oh, I literally don't care, they have 3 heads. They have 3 heads and they're green, and I don't care." And I think I feel the same about dragons and elves, but I could be wrong. So yes, I think at the moment I'm super happy with where I'm at. I know the next one is a psychological thriller. I think in the US they're going to try and bring it out at the same time as the UK. Oh, nice. So that might mean you get 2 this year. Because you might get one at the end of August, if my publishers can get everything up and running. So we're super excited if that's the case. And then the one I'm writing for 2027 is also, well, I actually would say that was more family drama. I think it's more this than psychological thriller. But yes, it has crime in it.
Right. Oh, exciting. So when you have the dual launches, do you have a US editor and a UK editor?
No, not really. I have a UK editor, but I have a fantastic publisher who is an editor for other people, but she is more of a publisher, Margaret. And I talked to Margaret. Yes,
she's lovely.
Isn't she fabulous?
Yes.
And I talked to Margaret, so and I always say to her when the book's presented, if there's something you hate flag, or if it's something you don't think will work in your market, flag. But she's been a fan of my work right back to Playing Away. So she has read them all and is very invested and is amazing. What happens in America is they do a completely different cover. And as I mentioned, sometimes a different title, because Margaret is this phenomenal publisher, and she will say, well, no matter what's inside it, the UK cover isn't going to work here.
Right.
We need a new cover, or, you know, whatever that, well, the title isn't going to work here. Somebody else has already got a similar title, something like that.
That team is so important. And
Absolutely.
Yeah, fantastic. Good. All right, so before we open it up to audience questions, I do want to know, so after writing this book, Our Beautiful Mess, what was the first non-writing thing you chose to do, that you had to do?
Oh, I can't swear on it, but usually it's clean cupboards. Because usually by the time I finished a book, we are living in squalor. Because towards the end of the book, there's a really intense run-up and nothing else matters to me, you know. Pots will get as far as the dishwasher, I suppose, but that's about it.
And everything gets thrown. It's same at our house.
Clothes on the floor, the articles, the old newspapers, anything. It is quite chaotic. So usually the first thing I start clearing out my desk and my office, and then I for some reason I then feel I need to look at the tins in the cupboard to check the expiry date and fling them out. I don't know why, but I think it's that wanting to be in control of something. Because actually when you finished, it's quite the nerve-wracking moment, isn't it?
Yes.
Because you send it off to your editor. In my case, every author does it differently, but my editors don't even know what I'm writing. I don't tell them the plot or anything.
You just go right in?
I just go right in, and I do that so that they can have the same experience as the reader. Sometimes I have told them the plot because I've wanted help or advice on which way to go, but quite often I send it off and then think, oh gosh, what if they say, oh no, it's nothing, not at all what we were hoping for, it's, start again. But luckily that hasn't happened yet. But yes, so when you send it off, there's normally sort of a week, 2 weeks that you're waiting for feedback. It's a little nerve-wracking.
Takes a little bit.
But the cupboards get a really good sorter.
Yes. Well, I'd love to open it up to some questions from the audience. If you have some thoughts to share and to ask from Adele.
Oh, lovely. Well done.
Have you ever had an editor really switch up your book?
I'm going to sound really frustrating and a little bit sickening right now. I'm barely edited.
Wow.
I'm barely edited. I think less than 2% ever changes.
Wow, that's fantastic.
Only because I really edit myself many times.
Yeah.
I think the last time that almost happened was a book called Tell Me Something, and the editor suggested some really wild changes, and I remember thinking, oh, the wild change is going to have to be the editor. Because she said, oh, we need a food fight, and I thought, why? And also I really object to food fights. I mean, morally I object to food fights. I really do. I just think it's food, somebody has grown it, and it's so disrespectful. But she sort of had seen a film apparently, and there'd been a food fight, and she said, oh, I thought it was really fun, and we should have something like that in your book. I remember thinking, no, I'm clocking out now. And I basically did, yeah. Not that means my publishers are scared of me, because they're really not. Every single time I hand it in, I will always say, and I do in writing say, if this is the one you think needs heavy editing or, needs sorting out, please tell me, because we all want the best book. But so far,
That's great.
it's really nice.
Yeah.
But it is because I'm horrible to myself. I do the job of an editor, and
Yeah.
I'm really quite mean to
You
myself.
kill your darlings.
I have thrown books out at 80,000 words.
Wow.
Ow. Yeah, it was an ow. It was my...
Shot to the heart.
Yeah. So my son was 18, and in England we do exams called A-levels at 18, and they're the most important ones because they're the ones that decide which university you're going to go to. So I thought I'll get my book done early so that I can be a devoted mother with a full fridge. And then when he comes home, if the exam's gone well, it's gone badly. Anyway, about 3 weeks before the exam started, I read through the book and thought, that is rubbish. and threw it out, turned to my son and said, "This is a lesson in resilience, you'll be fine." And he was. And we just both cracked on. We were both quite under the wind because the deadline doesn't change because I changed my mind. Several times I've completely changed viewpoint partway through. I often change tense. Don't you find it tricky to decide which tense?
Yeah, I run into that as well, and then half the book's in one tense and then the other, because you want to try it out a little bit, and then you have to decide.
And then you have to go
which
back
way.
over,
Which way, yes,
yeah. And points of view, sometimes I start with third person and then I think, no, this would be better first person. And that isn't a search and change, you know. You don't just look for the word Connie and then write I, which you did. It really affects what they know, what they can see. So, yeah, I'm really quite strict with myself. And I have big doubts. It's not that I swan through it thinking, oh, I'm so good, this won't be edited. I genuinely think it's so terrible, I must edit it 100 times before anyone even dares to look at it.
Yeah, do the work ahead, yes. What other questions do we have?
So you get a story and a thought and a plot line you want to go with. You ever get sidetracked with the other characters you brought in thinking, well, that's actually a better story if I followed this character?
Not that I follow their story, but a character can definitely be attractive enough that even though it's a small character, I think he or she is interesting. I think, oh, go on, I'll give you another scene, or actually you're the person they confide in, or actually you're the person who pulls the rug from under their feet and causes the problem. If it's a character that I think, oh yeah, people will want to hear more from them. And I learned that actually thinking of editors from my very, very first editor. And when she read Playing Away, she said, oh, I'd like to hear more from Luke. And she didn't say anything else other than, I'd like to hear more from Luke. And I thought, okay. And I went off and wrote more from Luke's point of view. So yes, I can be nudged, but I'm not usually derailed.
Out of all of your books, what is the one that's closest to you or is your favorite?
Closest to me is definitely book number 4, because it's called The Other Women's Shoes. And so I found myself, after 5 years marriage, single, which was not the plan, with a 10-month-old baby. Definitely not the plan. And it was a very sad and difficult time. And then some months later, when I started to pull my self-esteem back together and get out there, I met Jim. And I thought, well, he'll be a lovely rebound fling. He'll be a very pleasant one-night stand. I know, this is so embarrassing, and they're recording it. Anyway, he's now my forever night stand, which is good. But after about a year, I had been writing a book about, a comedy book about bigamy. And I rang my editor, and she's a very posh English editor, and I said, do you know this book about bigamy? And in those days I did pitch ideas, and it was Penguin, and they were really strict. And I said, I just can't do a comedy about bigamy because, you know, I'm single, my husband's left me. She went, yes, darling, we're so sad for you. Terribly, terribly sorry. Then again, you are under contract. So I thought, oh. So I just started writing up our dates. I sort of made a bit of a story. I split my own personality into 2 sisters and made a bit of a story about sisters. And it was really therapeutic, and I processed so much about the divorce, huge amounts, pretty much word for word for all the kind of conversations we had and all the conversations we had, and not just the conversations. So, after a year, I thought, I am handing this book, and my one-night stand is here being a forever night stand. I need to show him this book. So I then gave him the book, and he silently read it, and then looked up and just said to me, you didn't even change a t-shirt, you know, you've done nothing to disguise me. And I was like, no, honestly, I changed your name, I split me into 2 people, I gave you 2 babies rather than 1. No one is going to think this is us. Anyway, I get the ARC in advance, and I gave it to my mum and dad, because I always give them to read in advance. And one night, at about 11 o'clock on a Sunday night. Now, I don't know about you, if somebody rings me in those days, 11 o'clock Sunday night, someone's dead, right? Because why else would you ring? So I was very, very, tentative when I picked up the phone, and my mum was all giggling, a little bit as though she'd had a sherry probably before she rang me. So she said, I've read the proof. I said, oh, great. She said, wow, your Jim's got a pep in his step, doesn't he? So I wanted to die. And I thought, there isn't a thing that could embarrass me more right now. I want the world to, open up and swallow me. And then she said, your father's read it too. He wants to talk to you. Exactly. So that is obviously worse. But actually, bless my father, he came on the phone and said, we will never talk about this. And that would be great. That would be great. So yeah, so that one is close to my heart.
What was that one again?
The other woman's shoes. Yeah. I'm not coming back though next year. Not now. I was until that moment.
What other questions?
They're very good questions, and you should ask me because I'm here. Yes.
Where are you going from here?
Oh, lovely, good one. Tomorrow morning at 6 a.m., we're flying down through Florida to Tampa. And then the day after that, we're flying up to Hollywood.
Oh, wow.
We're doing a zigzag.
Wow.
It's very oddly planned, but I'm having a blast. So I'm seeing so much that I wouldn't see. So, I'm not grumbling. I'm the opposite to grumbling.
So you mentioned earlier in your bio that you had some of your books optioned. Tell us about that process. That's always so interesting to learn about.
So 2 have been made into movies. So The Image of You was made into a movie, and Jim and I exec produced that. And that was shot out in Utah, and all the characters were made into Americans, and the scriptwriter was an American guy who I worked with very closely, and he was super, and I really enjoyed that. It was an incredibly positive, creative relationship. I have a belief that if you sell your house and they redecorate, you cannot complain, okay? And selling your book option is a little like that. I think if you sell it, things will change. So they were saying to me, do you mind it's set in America? I said, I don't mind it's set in America, but if you're setting in America, you probably need an American writer. And that's what we did. And then Sasha Peters from Pretty Little Liars, she played the lead, and she was genius. It's a story about twins, so she had to play 2 people. She had to play to herself. She was genius. And I will be seeing her next week when we pop up to LA. We're doing a podcast together for Valentine's Day. And she was just so fabulous to work with. And the whole process, there was so many people on that set. It was so moving. I remember arriving, there were hundreds of people. And the idea that hundreds of people were there, employed, creating, bringing their thoughts to my little story that I'd made way back when. So that was, phenomenal. The process is slow and tricky. It's quite slow and tricky to get a book published, isn't it? I think it's 100 times slower and trickier to get a film made because there are so many jigsaw pieces. Largely it's down to finance. It's an expensive business. And it seems that you get the money once you get the talent attached to the script. You can't get a script unless you have some money because somebody needs to be paid for writing the script. But then so it's one of those circles. Eventually it can fall into place. It's like a jigsaw and it can eventually come together.
Very exciting, very exciting. And this would make a fantastic film or television series.
This is actually breaking news. It literally happened the Friday before I came here on the Monday.
Ooh.
This is now in development for a TV show.
Wow.
Yes.
Yeah, I can picture it.
Yeah,
It's
and
perfect.
I'm really excited that it's TV because I think there's a lot to get into here. And I love film, but film is obviously 90 minutes, where TV, they're talking about 6-parters, 60 minutes.
Yeah.
So that would give you time to investigate.
It's so exciting.
Well, many a slip between cup and lip, but we're on the path, which is
the
great.
idea of it that's
Yes.
so much fun.
And there's
Congratulations.
a terrific director already attached. and that's super news. He's won Emmys, and you know he's award winning. He's amazing. Yeah, James Strong. Yeah.
Wow. All right.
I
Amy,
have a question. So, I don't know if you can answer it or not, but because I don't pay attention half the time. What kind of like who are your favorite authors? What do you love to? I mean, you said you read everything, but like if you could pinpoint authors, you know, like I mean, who would you?
I'll give you a handful. How
Okay,
about
yeah,
that?
great.
Yeah. So for British authors, I read in one sitting Elisa Jewell.
Oh, I love her.
And I love her, and I love her personally because I've known her 25 years.
Wow.
Yeah, so there's no but. I will literally read that in a sitting, and there's not many other authors that I read in a sitting. There's another British author called Abigail Dean, and she's written 3 novels. First one was called Girl A, which you may have heard of, yellow cover, terrific book. And her latest, her 3rd one, is called The Death of Us. An amazing book, beautiful, brilliant. I say beautiful, which sounds weird, because it is about a serial killer. But it is beautifully written, and it's actually written from the victims that survived it. There's a couple of victims that didn't get killed. It was before he became a serial killer, but he did attack them, and it's beautifully done. So they're probably a couple of favourites. A totally different genre. There's a husband and wife couple called Josie and Emlyn who write comedy, and I love theirs for sort of uplifting books. You know, I would always turn to them. There's an author called Bryony Gordon. She's a journalist initially and now a podcaster, and now has just written her debut novel, which is called People Pleaser, which I absolutely raced through. Again, it's about a woman of a certain age who just stops wanting to please people. It was a lot of fun. But I actually read a lot of American writers. I think, you know, there's recently I read The Wedding People. I've just finished on Audible Half His Age. It has to come with a warning. It is possibly the most shocking book I've ever read. But again, beautifully written. But be warned, you know, it's not for the faint-hearted at all. It is about a relationship, and she is half his age, and again, it's written from her point of view, though, so the sort of victim is given a voice. So, but yeah, there were a number.
That's by the author who wrote her memoir.
Yes,
about her mother.
yes. I'm glad my mother's
I'm glad my mother's dead.
dead. Which actually is because she's glad her mother's dead because she doesn't see how many things she messed up. Yeah. I always feel that title needs an explanation.
Yes.
It's such a brave title.
It's a very brave title.
It is a brave title. I'm not sure I would have got with it, but she did, and she sold shed loads. I can't remember how many, but I'm going with like 500,000, you know.
Yeah.
Amazing.
But I do the Coco Mello's The Blue Sisters. I've just finished that one quite recently. It's interesting how many books are crossing the Atlantic now. It didn't, for a long time in my career, there was definitely well, these are American books and these are British books and never the twain shall meet. But there's a lot more now, I'm sure you see this all the time in your shop, that are both ways. Yeah. I guess we are more global now. We consume each other's, I mean, we always consumed American culture. The Brits did that, we watch your TV, but we didn't read your books really. Well, you know, Fitzgerald, but you know, the classics maybe, obviously, but the sort of modern fiction we weren't really reading, but that has flipped.
Yeah, you gave us Benny Hill though, so.
Yeah, we had nothing to offer you in the 70s. You gave us Fire Force at Major, so that was good.
So can you give us a little sneak peek into what we can expect next?
What's next? Ooh, can I?
Without giving it.
I could give you the title.
Yeah.
Would you like that as a little?
Yes.
The title is Eyes on You.
Ooh.
Yeah, and it's the same title in both countries. Kitching.
Yeah.
I did say to both. I said to both publishers, I literally don't mind what you call it, but can you call it the same thing? And they were like, really, you don't mind what we call it? I was like, no, I trust you, but please let's call it the same thing. and we got it down to about 5, and we all liked Eyes on You. It is a family psychological thriller. Should I say it? Oh, I mean, I could tell a little bit. It's, we meet the character, a woman, she's 32-year-old, she's working as a waitress. We get a sense that she doesn't feel she's fulfilled her potential. And then we find out that the reason is when she was 15, she witnessed her father murder his lover. And she testified against him. And it is the consequences of that.
Great.
Thank you. Well, thank you, Adele, so much. And everyone, you have to grab a copy of Our Beautiful Mess. As I mentioned, it is beautifully written, and it really gets into the heart and soul of this family who is been thrust into this beautiful mess.
So much drama.
Yes.
And I really try not to tell you what the drama
Yes.
is, but it's there.
Yes.
And I've got my own book with me. I've got a copy of Our Beautiful Mess with me because I'm taking it on this being my very first American tour. So it would be a real honour to me if everybody who's been here tonight would come and sign my book. That would be so much fun. And just as a lovely little keepsake from at the end of the tour, I can think all these people were there supporting me. And thank you so much for coming out tonight, because most of you probably didn't even know who I was. And now you do, and I love that, so thank you so much.
Thank you.